So welcome back to Being Your Best Self. We're here with Thor and Andy, and we're going to be talking about the one relationship that you can't get away from.
Yes.
As much as you'd love to, probably sometimes.
Sometimes it's like, really, can I get a break, please?
So there's one person that you probably, I don't know if you know who it is, but I know who it is already for you, by the way. And that's you. You can't get away from yourself. And actually that's an important thing to consider when you're thinking about being your best self.
Yeah.
Now, this was a topic Thor was particularly interested in exploring, so I'll let him.
Them.
And I know that, and I overstepped it, and I've like tripped over something, but that's okay.
These things happen all the time. No worries at all. Yeah. So I think for me, the reason I said this, that this was important to me, both you, Andy, and Ethan, is because I think we often don't realize just what a fundamental component this relationship is. Yeah. So the way I always talk about it is that the only relationship that is with you from your first breath to your last is the one you have with yourself. Not your parents, not your spouse or lovers, or not your kids, your friends. Nobody is with you every breath of the way. And when that relationship isn't very good, we are doing lots to avoid it. We're using caffeine, we're using work, we're using rescuing other people, saving the world, we're using drugs, we're using sex, we use all sorts of things to not feel here because the relationship is not good. And so actually, in order to be our best self, it's not like the relationship has to be perfect, really. Mine isn't. Me and myself and I adore my relationship with myself and I. But it's not like we always get on. It's not always great. I sometimes forget about myself, so it's not like I've got it all ironed out, but the commitment is there to care for it. So if you feel like, you're not really there yet, or you haven't even realized that there is a relationship to be had, don't worry, that's all right. We all start somewhere. But actually starting to get curious about kind of what's the quality of this relationship? How, I often say to people, what 3 words would you use to describe your relationship as it is today?
Yeah. And I was really struck by as well, Thor, just this idea of actually looking yourself in the mirror sometimes. And so I read a book recently, which was just talking about who you want to be and where you want to be. But this idea of, have you actually really looked at yourself in the mirror and had a look at that person and worked out who that person is? Because sometimes I think we have either ideas about what we think that person is, and sometimes those are healthy and sometimes they are not healthy. And sometimes we have ideas about what we perceive that person is. And again, sometimes those are healthy and sometimes they're unhealthy. But I think part of what we're called to do in this life is to kind of work out what that person needs to be their best self.
Yeah. And it can start really small. I mean, in general, I think it does, because it's a bit like if you're getting to know somebody else, let's say you're going on a date with somebody, you go somewhere, you meet in a neutral place, you order coffee, you split the bill, and then you go away and kind of, do I want to meet them again? So if you think about that kind of with yourself, don't kind of go on a silent retreat for 3 months. Well, I'm really going to get to know myself now. I mean, you're just going to terrorize yourself. It's about you're just going to, hello, how are you doing, mate? Okay, that's enough for now. Let's just go back to whatever we were doing before. And then just gradually, like you would do with any relationship, you start to build trust. You start to get, what are you interested in? Oh, I actually hate I really do genuinely hate gardening. As somebody who's into self-development, where it's all about, watering the flowers and blah, blah, blah. I've really tried to like gardening, but I genuinely don't. So now I've just come out of that closet. I don't like gardening.
That must have been a big one.
It was a big closet. It was a big door to crack open. But, what makes your heart sing? Sometimes when I start working with people and I go, what do you like? I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Okay, what movies do you like? What are the kids in charge of the remote control? Or my partner chooses dinner. It's like, just down to the basics. Even like, the question I almost always ask, the towel you use to dry yourself after a shower or bath, do you like the feel of it? One mum I worked with, there was a big light bulb moment. She realized, I hate it. And I was like, okay, let's get curious about that. Because she was the last one to have a shower and she always ended up with a little dishcloth, because the hubby and the kids are taking all the good towels, and she was trying to dry herself off with basically like a face cloth.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that kind of, how do I care for myself? And it doesn't have to be big. It can just be, do you like the towel you use to dry yourself with? Do you like the smell of your shampoo?
Yeah, no, I really get that. And I think there's also something in there about appreciating the small things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because as we think small, and that, part of me, as we think small, not in the sense of not thinking big, but in thinking of the small of what's going on in front of us, that can really bring into focus what's important. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had that experience when you're in your house and you think everything's okay, and then you start cleaning the kitchen, and suddenly you realize how dirty it is. It's just like there's dirt there that just should not be there. How does it get in these spaces? Because you've looked at the small in that moment, and then you stand back from it again.
Yeah.
Is that thing that really kind of that really strikes me, actually. And there's also another element to this, because for me, I've got, I'm a Christian. I've got that as my belief, and I'm quite conscious that God's with me, but I'm also quite conscious I always have a choice about how I turn up in that.
Yeah.
And that's important, because otherwise it becomes religion instead of faith. And I know that's a slightly different dynamic, but
that really does make sense to me, because in a way, so I'm Buddhist, so my practice is quite different, but it's that, when I am connected to my spiritual practice, I'm also connected to myself.
Yeah, because you've got to be present.
Exactly. So whatever your spiritual practice, or if you don't have one, so people watching this may not be Christian or Buddhist or Muslims or Hindus or whatever it is, Jewish, Catholics, whatever. But it's about, when I'm showing up for myself, I'm showing up for whatever that thing is. And for those of us who have faith or spiritual practice, that can be an aid to that. Or for those who haven't, there will be other ways in which we hold that connectivity, that connectedness.
I think the one thing that I'm just interested in around all this is making sure that you keep a record of this as well, because it's no good kind of keeping it in your head as something ethereal almost, because you're always going to look back with rose tinted glasses and say that was good, when actually it probably wasn't. So you need to journal or make notes in your phone, whatever it might happen to be. There's got to be something that's down somewhere that you can go back to and say, right, what was it 6 months ago? What was it 2 weeks ago? So you've got that kind of point of reference really as well. I think it's important.
So I don't know if you guys have heard of Julia Cameron.
No.
Okay, so she wrote a book, I think it was late 80s, early 90s, called The Artist's Way. Okay. And it's been a bestseller and it's still going. And in it, she talks about morning pages.
Right.
And so she talks about writing longhand for 3 pages every morning.
Oh, I've heard that idea before.
Yeah. Okay. So I've adapted that. I do 15 minutes on an app on my phone every morning. And what I do, or most mornings, is I have a metronome that I set for 15 minutes, and I set it down to 30 beats an hour.
Right.
A second. So a minute, 30 beats a minute.
Yeah.
So I've got this very slow beat for the 15 minutes. And then when the 15 minutes are up, the beat stops. So I just type. And it might be, I haven't got a clue what I'm writing about today. Or it could be, I'm so fed up with this person. Oh, I feel really profound in this moment. It goes from the petty to the profound and to the profound. But most mornings, me and myself and I hang out for 15 minutes just to get a sense of how we're arriving in the day. So it serves dual purposes. It serves the purpose you're saying, Andy, about a record.
Yeah.
Because as an app, I can look at it on my laptop. I can look at it on my phone. I can go back to whatever I was doing 27th of March last year.
Yeah.
But it's also a way of starting my day. So before I meet anybody else, I've met up with me.
Yeah. And that's really, and I'll tell you where that's really powerful thought. So where I work with people with neurodivergent conditions, for example, where short-term memory is sometimes a big issue.
Yes.
I think we all wake up and our brain is humming.
Yes.
And then we kind of impact reality. And it feels like my own experience and people I've worked with, experiences, then that's flushed.
Yes.
So before that flush happens, there's an opportunity.
Exactly. And it's often where we're at our most creative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just coming out of dream state.
There we go, guys. So the most important relationship in the world is with yourself.
Absolutely. Me and myself and I meet up.
So we'd love to hear how you're going to go away and develop this, and just let us know your thoughts. And thank you both very much for a fascinating discussion today. Love that.
Brilliant. Thank you both for having me.
Perfect. Thanks, Thor.